Hey, welcome. Have you ever had that strange feeling like you're just kind of the background noise in your own life? Well, today, we're going to get into a really fascinating and, for many of us, a really personal idea. How a specific role we played in our family growing up can actually become the blueprint for our entire adult identity. You ready to dive in? Let's do it.
So I want to start by asking you a question, and I want you to be really honest with yourself for a second. Is your value, your sense of worth, tied directly to how useful you are to other people, at your job, with your friends, even in your own family?
If that question just hit a little too close to home, the answer might not be about what you're doing right now, but about your past. Yep, we're talking about the specific role you were handed as a kid, and today we're going to unpack that.
All right, so let's start with the here and now. Let's talk about this feeling so many adults have, this thing we can call the usefulness trap. It's one of those feelings that can be so hard to put your finger on, but boy, is it always there. Does any of this ring a bell? That just persistent feeling that you don't really make a splash, that you're kind of low impact, or that quiet, nagging fear that if you stopped doing things for people, you might just disappear from their lives. It's this sense of being the reliable, steady background music, but never, ever the main song.
So where in the world does this come from? Well, to really get it, we need to rewind. We've got to go back and diagnose a very specific and actually super common family role. It's time to put a name to this whole experience.
I want you to meet the undervalued sibling. Now, the whole paradox here is pretty wild. This isn't a child who's ignored or neglected, not really. In fact, they get a ton of praise. But, and this is the key, they're praised for being independent, for being low maintenance, for being no trouble. And the lesson that gets learned, without anyone meaning for it to, is that your needs just aren't as important as your ability to handle everything quietly.
And this right here, this is the phrase that builds the entire identity. It totally sounds like a compliment, doesn't it? Oh, she's so resilient, or he can handle anything himself. But what a child hears is something different. They hear, no one needs to check on me, I'm okay by myself. It's a kind of loving dismissal that quietly says, you're on your own.
So how does a kid actually learn to become background noise? I mean, how does that even happen? Well, it happens inside the really complex dynamics of a family, where, let's be honest, attention is a pretty limited resource.
Just take a look at this breakdown. It's fascinating. In a lot of families, you've got what you might call the squeaky wheel sibling. Their problems, their needs, they draw the focus. They learn pretty quickly that when they express a need, care and attention rush in. But the will-be-fine sibling? They learn the complete opposite. Their reward, that praise, that approval, it comes from not having needs. And you can see right here how one kid becomes a main character in the family story, while the other just sort of fades into the wallpaper.
Now here's a really important point. This is not about blaming our parents or pointing fingers. Not at all. It's about understanding a super common family pattern. It's where a really competent, capable kid figures out that, hey, the easiest way to keep the peace around here is to just not take up any space. They literally learn to make themselves invisible for the good of the team.
And that strategy, the one you learn as a kid, it doesn't just go away when you grow up. It hardens. It becomes your identity. And this is the real, lasting consequence, a deep-seated belief that you are, by your very nature, a low-impact person. Let's just walk through how this happens, because it's a step-by-step process. First, it starts with praise for being so independent. And that feels good. So then, step 2, you start to notice that when you're quiet and you don't need anything, things at home are just calmer. Your invisibility becomes a tool for creating harmony. And over time, that leads to step 3. It's not a behavior anymore, it's a belief about yourself. I'm a low-impact person. And that leads us to the final step. The only way to feel seen, to feel loved, is to be constantly, endlessly useful.
And here's the really brutal math of it all. The very same child who is praised for being fine on their own grows up to be an adult who is secretly terrified that they are nothing on their own. Their whole sense of who they are has been tied to what they do for everyone else.
Okay, so what do you do with all this? It sounds a little heavy, right? But here's the thing. Just seeing the blueprint, that's where the power is. Understanding the architecture of this feeling is the first most important step. It's all about awareness.
So if you walk away with anything today, I want it to be these 3 things. First, that constant pressure you feel to be useful, that is a learned identity, not the actual truth of who you are. Second, that label, the one who will be fine, that was a role you played. It is not the full, complex, messy, and needy person you are absolutely allowed to be. And finally, just getting this, just understanding the origin story, that is the first giant leap toward real change.
Look, you can't go back in a time machine and change how your family worked.
but by recognizing the pattern, by seeing how all the wiring got installed in the first place. You give yourself the freedom to write a totally new future. You get to choose differently right now.
And so I'll just leave you with this final thought. It might be an uncomfortable question, but it's probably the most important one. If you take away all the tasks, all the favors, all the responsibilities you take on for other people, who are you when you are not being useful? The answer to that question, well, that's where your new story really begins. Thanks so much for joining me.